Live in just a moment. 12 waiting. There we go. Should be live. If you could just give us a check, Mr. Bounds, if we are live.
We are now. Yes.
That's good. Inglorious 1080p. Oh, my word. Hello, chat room. Good evening. Yes, I'm in the hot seat this week. Matt's off doing something I'm so glad that I didn't say I'd do, because I don't think I want to be sitting in the cold, damp, wet village of Eye in Suffolk this evening. Freezing. What is the temperature outside here? It's 5 it's a balmy 5 degrees Celsius.
41 degrees Fahrenheit for the
thank you, Nick.
Times.
Thanks, Nick. I thought I'd sport the Christmas jumper already for the season. And yes, I have watched it again on the Blu-ray that I brought. And Gemma's watched it as well. Now, Gemma has sat there and watched the whole of Top Gun Maverick, and she loved it. Although she won't admit that, probably, on live TV. All right, let's get the VT clock ready. All right, that's Ren. That's in. VT clock's ready. So whenever you say, Nev, I'll press some buttons. Micah? No, I haven't. That's because I had my notifications turned off on Viber. Having so many social media platforms to look at is... Oh, yeah. Oh, yes. I must reply. We'll have a look. I'll have a look later. How are we doing, Nev?
We were doing fine, but you'd frozen completely.
Oh, I'm here. Do you want me to press it?
Yeah, I know.
No?
And we've got to start the clock now, because it's that time.
There it is. It started.
God.
Are you ready, Armando?
Ready to go?
Woohoo! Here we go.
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3.
Well, hello, everybody. Today is the 2nd of December, 2022, a beautiful day to fly here in North Carolina, over there in England. In this week's show, this is episode 436. We're almost to 500. Can you guys believe it? Right, we're almost there. We got to start planning it.
We're going to have to get down. It's going to be a big planning session coming up soon.
Yeah, I feel like we're going to do an APG and just kind of have a barbecue here in North Carolina. But anyways, here in this week's show, we're going to talk about pilot incapacitations. We're going to talk about some single pilot operations, which just keeps popping up every couple of months. We're going to talk about some medical reforms, as well as letting everyone know that Elvis's private jet is up for auction. So we should start pooling our money right now. In the military, we're going to talk about those Western pilots that were helping train the Chinese, and now they're in a heap of trouble. The Argentinians snubbed India in favor of an American F-16 deal, and Ukraine is set to receive some secondhand seekings from our friends over at the United Kingdom. Joining me this week, the godfather of all UK aviation podcasts, It's Carlos Stebbings. Hi, Carlos.
Thanks, Armando. Oh, what an introduction! That should be me giving that kind of introduction to you, to introduce you on the show. Oh, hello. Welcome from a very chilly and damp and wet UK, 5 degrees Celsius, very foggy. It's been foggy most of the day, to be fair. And I know I've been stuck on the UK's, one of the UK's biggest and longest roads for most of today, on the A1M today, just for a change. So how are things?
Yeah, but it's the UK, so there is actually no straight parts of that road that are more than about a kilometer long, right?
Well, there are some bits that are straight, and to be fair, it is less potholey than the A14 or the A12. The only problem was this morning that at the early this morning, because it was around about 9 o'clock this morning, they shut a large section of the A1 off, which meant I had to take a detour, which in the van, which I'm glad I was in the van today, wasn't too bad. But if I'd have been in the truck, it would have been a different story now, because I probably would not have been back here in time to do the show. But a problem is, Armando, in this country we've got a thing, and Nev will know this. When it's foggy, people don't bother putting their fog lights on, and when it's not foggy, people put their fog lights on.
Yeah. Well, you know what? There are a lot of things that I miss about England. The roads are not one of them. I'd rather go fly an experimental paraglider than go back to driving on the farm roads of England and cheating death pretty much every time that I get in my car. But that's a American driving over there. Anyway, speaking of royalty, with big news this week, I don't know if you guys know, did you guys see the news article? The CEO of Nev Air branching out, starting his own business. It's Nev.
Yeah, I was trying to keep that quiet, but no, the news got out onto the wires, didn't it? But hi everybody. Hope you had a good week. It's been a very hectic week for me this week. Lots of driving, lots of resetting engine management code lights on the Focus. We don't, that's a bit of a nuisance. So
again,
that's got to go into the garage next week for a bit of investigation. But I had a great meet up with, guess who? Nick Codling on... what day was it? Was it Wednesday or was it Thursday? Oh dear! It was the 30th of November, anyway, whatever date that was. That was a Wednesday, wasn't it? So I happened to be down in Exeter, right next to the airport at the Hilton there, and he doesn't work very far from there. So we had a great chance to meet up, catch up, talk aviation and general stuff, and it was great to see him because I haven't seen him since the 400th show. So it was really nice to see Nick, and thanks ever so much for coming out to play, Nick. It was really enjoyable. It was great to meet up.
So
yeah, that's the best part about this, is meeting up with our listeners and putting names to faces, isn't it?
That's what we need to do. We need to plan more meetups next year here in the UK, so we can see more people, see more of the listeners. That's one of the points that we're going to have to bring up in our annual meeting in the new year, guys.
Yes,
preferably after April 11th and before April 18th, because that's when I'll be over there in the UK.
We'll have the meeting then.
Yeah, that would be great. You are very quickly going to realize that we are missing a few folks. We're missing our resident button pusher, Matt, who I'm sure is doing something very, very productive and much more interesting than hanging with us on a Friday night. Also missing this week is producer John, who is off slipping the surly bombs, taming the skies somewhere like the intrepid aviator that he is. So Carlos is button pushing. We'll see how this goes. Let's see. But most importantly, we've got our chat room, and I've got it up. And in there, first into the chat room, getting the gold star is actually Neville Bounds. So good job, sir. You get the gold star for being first in there. Close seconds and third. Mazuz Karim's in there. Richard Adams in there. I see Hobby Time's in there. Lee Davies is in there. Thank you. I can't wait to go back and forth with Lee throughout the show. We've got Captain Cruz in there. Nick Codling is in there. So maybe you can tell us the other side of the meetup. Main man Micah with the blue spanner of death. And Dr. Steph is in there. I love it. Keeping an eye on us also. Bill's in there. Nico's in there. Alan White's in there. Arnie's in there. And
just noticed that Alan White is in Paris Charles de Gaulle Airport.
Oh,
Not one of my favourites, I have to say. I'm just wondering how he's getting on there. That's all.
Well,
That's one
I can remember going through Charles de Gaulle once, Nev, and I honestly thought that I'd gone back to 1974.
But hey, you know what? Bell bottoms are making a comeback, and so is ABBA.
You just talking about one of the discos I do on a Saturday night, aren't you, Armando? That's what it is. ABBA, yeah.
Well, actually, we had an ABBA dance party in our house last night, only because my chief pilot hates ABBA, and I decided to just send him a video of the entire family singing to Fernando, which we've renamed Armando. Anyways, anyone listening to the audio version, come over to YouTube. Come see our beautiful faces. It's youtube.com/Plane Talking UK, or you can just search it. You can hit the subscribe button, hit the bell icon, and get notified when we hit that live button, or get notified 5 minutes late when Carlos hits that live button. And then you can be part of the chat room and shape the show. Anyways, guys, we got a lot of stories to talk about. Carlos, are you ready? Let's do some commercial.
Let's do it.
Fasten your seatbelts.
Now, we did touch on this on, I think it was last week's show, guys, didn't we, about the liquids. I think we just briefly touched on it. But this story comes to us from theguardian.com, and London City Airport are going to allow laptops and liquids through security in hand luggage. So passengers will be able to leave laptops and liquids in their hand luggage when passing through security at London City Airport from next year. The hub is trialling one security lane equipped with advanced baggage scanners and plans to introduce the machines in all of its lanes by April. The airport in the east of the capital said it will be one of the first in the UK to offer full CT or computed tomography scanners. Tomography? I don't know. The airport said it would replace its conventional security X-ray machines with new technology. Passengers failing to remove items from their bags or travelling with large bottles of liquids and creams are the biggest cause of delays at airport security. The new system will mean that travellers can leave everything in their hand luggage before going through the X-ray machine. It emerged this week that security restrictions on liquids and laptops in airport hand luggage could be abolished completely in the UK in 2024 due to the deployment of the high-tech 3D scanners. The government is considering rolling out the advanced technology in 2 years' time, although a final decision has not been made, a source told the BBC. The new technology, which has been trialled at London's Heathrow Airport since 2017, enables staff to zoom in on a bag's contents, rotate the images for inspection. And London City Chief Operating Officer Alan Fitzgerald said in a statement, following one of our lane trials this year, we know the new CT scanners are high performance and our passengers love them. It also delivers the high security specifications. Currently, passengers taking liquids into the cabin are restricted to containers of up to 100 millilitres, which must be placed in a single, transparent, resealable plastic bag when they pass through airport security. And these rules have been in place since November 2006. The advanced scanners are already in use in US airports, be interesting to hear about this, Armando, such as Hartsfield Jackson in Atlanta, Georgia, O'Hare in Chicago, as well as Helsinki Airport and Amsterdam's Schiphol Airport. So, Armando, I'm guessing you've already seen these over in your neck of the woods.
I gotta be honest, I haven't noticed. I have not gone through security in Atlanta in a long time. So I'm not actually sure. Haven't seen how this works. But we have been talking about this for the last couple of months, haven't we?
What do you think, Nev? Is this, do you reckon this is a good idea? Do you think the scanner's up to the...
Yeah, but Alison Fitzgerald says our passengers love them. I beg to differ. The 4 times I've been through them, well, obviously not myself, but my bags, twice at London City Airport and twice at Amsterdam Schiphol, along with a whole load of other people, all that seems to happen is that the bags get pulled to one side. You know, they go into the what I call the naughty lane of the conveyor belt, and then have to be manually searched, taking twice as long as it would do in the normal thing. Now, they've got one of these machines at London City, and I think all of them at all lanes at Schiphol. But I've not had any experience where it's been faster. In fact, it's been slower because there's manual intervention required. I hope it gets better. It has to get better because this is the biggest bottleneck that's going on at the moment. And if they're going to have to manually search many of the bags that go through, then you might as well just revert back to the original stuff. But I remain to be impressed by it, but I've not been so far.
Mash is just saying in the chat room, actually, Schiphol has had them for a long time and never had a problem with them.
Well, it's obviously just me.
Scanners, must be. But it is one of those things that causes bottleneck. I think because people just forget you put your bottle of, or your bottle of water you purchased from the WH Smith in the airport, and you just sling it in your bag, forget about it, and then they spot.
But I've got none of that. You see, I've got none of that. Just very small amounts of liquid, laptop, iPad, and that's it. And myself, along with so many other people, end up getting the bags get manually searched, and therefore the queues are just as big. So anyway, well, if they've got a solution for it, I'm up for it, because if we can get through security quicker, so much the better.
And before we move on, Nev, Lee Davis is saying no crisp shirt was a reason at Neville Bounds. So
said, well, there you are, you see. That's it.
You weren't wearing that crisp shirt as usual.
They are.
Obviously, if you were wearing the PTUK shirt, they would obviously put you straight through. So,
it's fast track every time.
Yeah, every time. So, Nev, you've got the next story, and it's about hydrogen propulsion.
AIN Online is the website for this one, and it says that Rolls-Royce and EasyJet have completed ground tests with an early concept demonstrator for a hydrogen propulsion system that they hope will eventually be capable of powering narrow-body airliners. The partners announced on the 28th of November that they recently ran a modified Rolls-Royce AE 2100A turboprop airliner engine on green hydrogen, made from wind and tidal power, inspired by the United Nations-backed Race to Zero campaign to achieve net zero carbon emissions by 2050. A series of ground tests conducted during November with the concept demonstrator at the UK's Boscombe Down Defence Research Facility has prepared the way for full-scale ground tests using the Pearl 15 turbofan engine that Rolls-Royce developed for Bombardier's global 5500 and 6500 business jets. Eventually, the engine maker intends to scale up the technology to work with large turbofans needed for aircraft such as the Airbus A320 family operated by EasyJet across Europe. Separately, Airbus is building a hydrogen fuel cell engine for aircraft, and as part of its goal to have zero-emission aircraft enter service by 2035, Airbus has announced the development of a hydrogen fuel cell engine designed for airplanes. Unlike Rolls-Royce's recently announced jet engine that burns hydrogen directly, it would use an electric motor, just like fuel cell cars, whilst emitting only water. It could eventually be employed in commercial aircraft that could carry up to 100 passengers around 1,000 nautical miles, the company said. Airbus plans to test the engine by the middle of the decade on its A380 MSN-1 aircraft, currently being modified to carry hydrogen tanks, it said. However, the technology appears to be designed for smaller, regional-type aircraft that use more efficient propeller rather than jet engines. The company didn't provide any more details, but fuel cells are a well-known technology for cars. They're far less efficient than battery electric vehicles if you count fuel production and conversion to electricity. However, they do have more range, are faster to refuel and lighter, with the latter, of course, being essential for aircraft. So lots more in the world of carbon zero. Well, it's a bit of a race, isn't it? Who's going to get there first?
Yeah, I thought it was interesting that Airbus and Rolls-Royce are both publishing their hydrogen engine efforts this week, and basically taking two different approaches. I don't know how many times we've talked about this on the show, with Neil Cluffley and his approach to hybrid propulsion, but it does exactly, Nev, feel like the race is on now. And over the next year or two, I feel like we're going to be talking a lot about this and about these hybrid engines and alternative fuels and sustainable fuels. I know I subscribe to all of the business aviation, the National Business Aviation Association weekly newsletter, and that is a big deal in the business sector, is these sustainable aviation fuels as well as hybrid propulsion. And I think, as this article kind of insinuates, we will probably see it on some business jets right before we see it develop into a larger scale commercial implementation or something like that.
I don't know what to make of it, really. This whole hydrogen powered thing. I quite like the smell of Jet A1 personally, but
You guys ever driven on one of those propane Defenders?
Oh, the Defenders, yeah.
I used to have a Defender, and I thought about converting it over to a liquid propane, and I don't know the advantage that I was going to get by doing that, but I don't know. I like my 2.3 or 2.5 liter petrol engine that I had in it.
Yeah, but the difference is, Armando, you can afford to fill a tank in the US, whereas in the UK you need to take out various loans and stuff to fill up a tank of fuel in the UK. Isn't that right, Nev?
Absolutely. Although the fuel cost has come down slightly by a few pennies in the last couple of weeks, but not to the level of the United States.
No.
Unfortunately.
Nowhere near.
We went up and then we came way back down. And now, actually, I just flew the Cub this morning, and the person I was flying asked me how much it is. And it's actually down to about $5 a gallon for avgas for 100 low lead, which was... It's about $2.50 less than it was just a few months ago. So, wow. It is coming back down pretty significantly here in the U.S.
We can only wish, hey, Nev, one day. Anyway, Armando, you've got the next story, and I think it's an update, isn't it? You've got from the Dallas Air Show crash.
That's right. There's been some social media on this. It's been out on some of the aviation channels. Now that the NTSB has issued their preliminary report, this particular story is from WSLS.com, which is local news reporting. So as we know, there was 6 crew members killed a couple weeks ago at that Wings Over Dallas Air Show, where the P-63 Air Cobra crashed into the B-17 Texas Raiders. So now that there has been the initial interviews, the preliminaries out, it's actually turning out, when I spoke on the subject, I was talking about crowd lines and how there was a 500-foot crowd line and a 1,000-foot crowd line. A lot of that was based on the analysis by Mr. McSpadden from the AOPA Air Safety Institute. Well, now we have more information, and those statements that I was making, that some people were making, were based on some core rules of engagement and some core operating procedures for any air show that I've ever taken part of, standard operating procedures. Well, it has turned out that there is a lot of criticism now about the qualifications of the air boss for that air show, and that there was actually no coordination of altitudes before the flight, while the airplane's in the air. And the report actually said that the P-63 was the third in a formation of 3 fighters. As we know, the first 2 were P-51s. The B-17 was the lead ship of a 5-ship bomber formation. And apparently, there was no deconfliction from time and space by the air boss. Now, I am certainly not blaming the air boss here on this show. but it seems to be a pretty significant causal factor that kind of deconfliction was not previously coordinated before the day's events on the air show. In addition to that, there was apparently an instruction given from the air boss to the fighter formation to overtake and take the lead in front of the bomber formation. We at Reno, because Reno is mostly races, but about 20% of the week is air show. And I get to sit in the briefings with the ground boss, with the air boss, with the mini boss, with the safety, FAA, everybody's in there. And one of the core tenets of running air shows is that nobody flies your airplane. Nobody flies your airplane from the ground. And there was an instruction given to the fighter formation that resulted in a loss of separation between the fighter and the bomber formation. The rest of the events happened as we all know already, and we have briefed, where the limited visibility from the P-63 led to the ultimate collision between the two aircraft. The B-17 never saw the P-63 coming, but the investigation seems to be going that way, where there was a lack of coordination from the top down for the entire air show. So that's pretty much the update that we're getting. This is coming out from people that were there, people that were in the briefings. There's actually recordings of the briefings. Obviously, before they are made public, the NTSB is getting a hack at them. But it seems to be the way the investigation is going. So very unfortunate series of events there.
How do you think this is going to affect air shows over in the US, Armando? Because obviously in the UK, obviously we've had our share of some quite bad accidents here in the UK over the years. Obviously not hundreds, but there are occasional accidents. Do you think this will change things heavily in the US as to how air shows are put together, how they're run, where the public are, where the display actual circuit is set in regards to where the crowds is or they are?
So I think initially we all thought that this was a landmark event in the air show circuit. Now that this information is coming to light and kind of finding a bit of a smoking gun, which was just one individual or a staff of individuals, it may not really affect the air show execution, aside from perhaps reviewing the qualifications of an air boss or establishing some more FAA oversight as to the actual execution of the day's events. I think that's where we're going to see the most immediate change.
Oh, Armando's frozen. Nev, are you still there? We seem to have lost Armando. Have we lost? I think we've lost the Zoom feed. Yes, we've lost Armando, and we've lost the Zoom feed
beforehand and on the day itself. So things start to go wrong when unplanned events start happening. Am I reading that the right way?
Exactly. No, you're exactly right. They when you're doing audible changes like that, audible as in football term, sports term, where you're making changes on the fly to the brief. We take great pride in our briefings and having all of the information. It's already such a dynamic environment that you're trying to write down as much information on your knee board that you eliminate those kinds of on-the-fly decisions and instructions. So you are exactly right, Nev. And when you start moving things on the schedule or moving formations around without having briefings, that is exactly where things go wrong. One of the places, I suppose.
Yeah.
So moving on to the next story then, and this one comes to us from aeroexplorer.com, and it's a story that I think we all saw on the social media networks this week because it featured quite heavily on Twitter. I noticed there's quite a few pictures on there, and it's the Mooney that crashed into power lines in Gaithersburg?
Gaithersburg, Maryland.
Yeah. Thursday, November the 27th, an MFC Corporation Mooney M20J departed Westchester County Airport in White Plains, New York at 3 p.m. before crashing and becoming entangled in power lines approximately 2.5 hours later. The aircraft was bound for Montgomery County Air Park in Gettysburg, MD. On the approach to Montgomery County Air Park, restricted visibility became an issue for the 65-year-old lawyer Patrick Merkel, the pilot flying. Weather conditions were reporting mist and fog, low visibility and cloud ceilings at the time, requiring instrument flying conditions. The aircraft crashed into the power lines almost 2 miles northwest of the runway whilst on final. The accident, which took place at 5:30 p.m, with both the pilot and passenger trapped inside while the aircraft was suspended on the power lines approximately 100 feet above the ground. It took emergency services and in excess of 7 hours to extricate the plane and its occupants, with 120,000 homes left without power during the operation. Montgomery County schools were closed for the day. I bet the kids were really upset by that, with the entire rescue complete at 1 a.m. in the morning. Both occupants of the aircraft sustained serious injuries, according to the Montgomery County Fire and EMS Service. As of now, the NTSB are investigating the crash and estimates preliminary report within 3 weeks of this crash. The NTSB says it will be focusing mainly on the pilot, the aircraft and the environment at the time of the accident, and no criminal activity or foul play is suspected as yet. Now, Armando, I was reading the reports about this when it was online after, or a day after it happened. It did say on there that, because it sort of shocked me a bit, that they were hanging there for quite some time, but they can't obviously exactly just climb up and grab these people from the aircraft with power lines that are possibly, even though they're switched off, still have a fair amount of static, I'd imagine, or built up residual power in the lines itself.
Well, this was a pretty significant power line running through the area. They were tall, they were high tension power lines. So even to just shut the power off, to quote the philosopher Spock from Star Trek, the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. So if you're going to shut off power to a major power line system running through Gaithersburg, which is suburban Washington, D.C., there's a lot of coordination that needs to happen before you do that. All of your emergency services, hospitals, homes, retirement homes that will be affected, medical facilities. It was, late in the evening, but before you shut off that kind of power to an area, you're going to have to coordinate that with a lot of agencies. So that's probably took a little bit of time to do that. I'm sure they were, the first responders were on the scene and talking to the individuals from the ground 100 feet down. But to actually effect the rescue took some serious coordination. As far as the cause of this one, yeah, you can see in that picture there. I mean, they were about 100 feet up. The power lines are about 200 feet. So pretty significant power line. Two takeaways from this: the structural integrity of the Mooney, pretty impressive there to be able to run into a power line tower and still maintain its structural integrity. But I think as a causal factor, you're probably going to find that spatial disorientation and lack of instrument proficiency are probably going to be at the top of the initial report. Because if you're 2 miles from the runway at 100 feet trying to do an instrument approach, you're not in the right place.
Yeah, I'm just looking at the one of the other pictures. I'll just see if I can grab this picture as well of the cherry picker that they used. Let me just put my camera on here so you can just see me just for a second. I'll bring this picture up here because they were talking in one of the stories about the cherry picker they were used. There we go, for the benefit of you all on YouTube. I'm surprised they managed to find a cherry picker with a long enough boom mast to get up to the aircraft itself. So I think they've done quite a good job there, Armando, actually.
Yeah. Well, our expert field analysis and analysts are actually, we've got some commentary, which is, don't we have more current information? And Micah also says, funny that they would crash into power lines that provide AC power right into DC.
Ha, 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 ha.
He also said the story was really shocking. Yeah. We were all electrified by the whole thing.
Oh, my word. Let's move swiftly on before anything else happens on the show. Nev, you've got the next story.
Correspondent, man, Mike.
Yeah. Well, sadly, on a rather more serious note, this is on flyingmag.com. And it says that an airline pilot who became incapacitated during a flight from Chicago to Columbus, Ohio on November the 19th has died. The pilot, whose name has not been released, was required flight crew aboard Envoy Flight 3556, which was an Embraer E175 operating as American Eagle with service from Chicago to John Glenn International Airport. According to liveatc.com, approximately 30 minutes into the flight, the pilot flying as first officer notified air traffic control by saying need to return, the captain is incapacitated. The flight was cleared back to O'Hare. Subsequent transmissions between ATC and O'Hare Tower depict controllers giving the pilot flying clearance back to the airport and information as to where to taxi so that medical personnel could get to the incapacitated pilot. According to a story appearing on CNBC, Captain Rick Wilson, Vice President of Envoy's Flight Operations, said in a note to staff that the incapacitated pilot was a captain in training, occupying the left seat. Yesterday, the airline released a statement on the event, noting that the flight landed safely and the first responders met the aircraft upon arrival. Despite heroic efforts by those on board and first responders on the ground, our colleague passed away at the hospital. We're deeply saddened and are doing all we can to support his family and our colleagues at this time. It's worth remembering, of course, that in the US, it's mandatory to have 2 pilots aboard during a Part 121 operations for safety reasons. Of course, there have been other incidents as well. Actually, all of these this year. Jet 2 near Frankfurt on September 22nd, where a first officer was incapacitated. WestJet 737 near Winnipeg on the 16th of November, one of the pilots was briefly incapacitated. And Alaska B 737-800 over the Pacific, 2 flight attendants incapacitated due to fumes. 737-800 of Fly Dubai near Shiraz, a captain was incapacitated, and Austrian 767-300 near Vienna on October the 22nd, where a first officer was incapacitated. So, yeah, very sad to hear the news about what's happened there, but that's why there's 2 guys or girls in the cockpit.
Is that something you ever think about, Armando? Because I know a lot of the flights that you do, you're on your own up there. Is that something that goes in the back of your mind sometimes?
Certainly. The only airplane that I fly professionally on my own is the Pilatus, and when it's a Part 135 charter, we always have 2 pilots up there. Even when I am doing Part 91 owner flights in the Pilatus, I always request to have a second pilot there. That's usually a pilot of my choosing. So I've got a little network of flight instructors and up and coming professional aviators that have all their qualifications. So they may have a commercial, single engine, commercial, multi-engine land. But there's this weird, you're in limbo part of your career between getting your freshly minted commercial license and being hired by anybody at 750 to 1,000 hours. So I like to take those individuals that I've met over the years here in the Charlotte area, and I will request to the owner that I fly with a second pilot on board, even if I can't pay them anything, but they're there for the experience and they're there for the safety of exactly this kind of incident. Nev, that was just a pool of aircrew incapacitation incidents reported in the last 3 months. So it is actually much more common than one would think. And I don't understand how airlines are still pushing for single pilot operations within a passenger carrying capacity. Carlos, you've got the audio from this with the silence removed, right?
Excuse me. I don't think I have.
It started playing there for a second.
Oh, that was through my laptop here. I don't think. Well, you might be able to hear it on there. Just see if you can hear it or not. Let's just have a look and see how clear that is. This might work. Here we go.
Can I help you? 6, when you return, Captain is incapacitated.
Right, Albert 3556 as instructed. Go ahead and give me that right turn heading 040.
Right, 040, way 3556.
I maintain 5,000 feet and let us sit you to Chicago departure on 125.0. So you're going to get your resequence right back in.
Right, 250, 356. And departure way 3556, 4,000, 5,000.
Albert 3556 departure.
Yeah, with you, 4.5, 5,000.
Albert 3556, you're returning, is that correct?
Affirmative, as quick as possible. The captain is is out.
Albert 3556, you should expect runway 28 center. This is firing up 080.
Hey, 0, 0, 35.
Albert 3556, speed of your discretion. Your vehicle running this and maintain 3,000.
No, 3,000, way 3556, vector speed rates.
Albert 3556, connect Chicago approach on 133.62.
3362, way 3556. Chicago, way 3556 is 5,000, 3,000. Way 3556, Chicago approach, Roger. Expect the visual approach runway 28 center. They give you discretion to 3, is that right? Yep, and we're at 4800, 3,000. Okay, and did you have any information I need to pass along to the tower in terms of paramedics, gate number, any of that? No gate number, and he's knocked out. We're going to need paramedics working on everything right now. Okay, thank you. Boy 3556, we can turn base to...
And the recording is available on Twitter and various feeds, and we'll put the links on the show notes. One of the things that I did note I've heard this recording myself before, Armando, is how calm the first officer was during the whole process. There was no, he's very well composed.
Yeah. Well, so part of that has to do with the individual sitting in the right seat was actually a captain and a line check airman. So the individual that eventually deceased was actually an upgrade. So it was a captain upgrade. That was an officer that was progressing up to captain, and the person in the right seat was a training captain, a line check airman when this whole situation happened. So the individual in the right seat was actually well qualified to fly that airplane. Whether or not it was a line check airman, this was a conversation that we had here in our aviation family. It's also a reminder that even a first officer, a brand new first officer, even done with brand new from training, is a qualified pilot of that aircraft. They receive a PIC type rating in the Embraer, in the CRJ, in whatever regional airliner. They're fully qualified to be up there, and they're fully qualified to fly that airplane in all phases of flight. There is one thing that we didn't get to in the audio recording that is a point of contention amongst our professional aviators. Do you guys know, when you get on the ground, how do you steer an airplane?
Use a tiller, normally on the captain's side, just near where your knee is, where your knee sits.
Exactly. So further along in the recording, the tower asks the pilot flying, who is no doubt at this point in an emotional situation, right? An emotional event, as I like to say. Do you need any assistance? What are your intentions once you land? And that pilot says, well, I'm going to have to stop on the runway or just off the runway, get the captain out of the seat, and then we're going to taxi to gate L13. So that line check airman who was captain qualified, his course of action that he chose that day was to remove the incapacitated captain, put him on the floor or with the cabin crew, jump into the left seat, and then taxi another 5-10 minutes to a gate where emergency responders are waiting. Our general consensus is that is not what we would have done. And I don't know, I haven't spoken to anybody at Envoy Airlines, but I know the operators that I have worked for, the company policy, if you have an emergency like that, is just to stop on the runway and let the emergency responders do what it is that they're going to do, even if you're shutting down a runway at Chicago O'Hare. So I do take some issue in stopping on the runway, jumping into the left seat, and taxiing an additional 5 minutes. In the recording, the now captain, the now flying pilot, expresses some concern that first responders will not be able to reach the door of the ERJ 175. I can guarantee you that at Chicago O'Hare, they have emergency services that are very capable of reaching the boarding door, even on the runway. So nobody is marginalizing the fact that he single piloted that airplane while having to take care of his fellow captain there. But John Jester in the chat says they have stair trucks for 747s. Again, these are highly trained airport rescue and firefighting individuals. Even if it's just plop a ladder up and get a couple firefighters and medics up there and stretcher the incapacitated pilot down. But I don't know that I would have chosen the course of stopping and then taxiing 5 minutes. But, either way, I mean, very, very significant event, and kudos to the pilot for staying calm. I would expect that from a line check airman, but
a sad outcome anyway from the event, for sure.
Yeah.
Staying with you, Armando, for the next story.
Yeah, so sticking with the same theme, actually, basic med. That's a thing that we have here in the U.S. There is some new new rule from the FAA allowing pilots that are flying under basic med to act as safety pilots for other pilots. So, for example, if I want to go do some instrument currency in a Cessna or a Piper, to legally log that instrument currency, I need to be under foggles or in actual instrument conditions. But I need to have, if I'm under foggles operating a VFR flight under simulated IFR, I need to have a safety pilot in the right seat that is qualified in that class and category. They don't need to be instrument qualified. But there was this problem that pilots that are operating under basic med could not act as safety pilots. And that is a minor change that's happening. There's about 60,000 US pilots who are now flying under basic med. And they will be able to take advantage of this new rule, allowing them to act as essentially a second in command, in a training scenario or whatever scenario you can come up with. Have you heard of basic med, or you guys have anything like basic med over there in the UK that you know of?
No, I haven't personally heard of it. Well, not when it comes to I mean, we have obviously medicals in the UK for when you go for your PPL, when you apply to train, to do any pilot training. You have to have a certain degree of medical certificate from an actual air, an air medical chap. Yeah,
right. We have the traditional method here in the US is exactly that, is to get a third class, a second class, or a first class FAA medical certificate. Basic med came around early 2000s, basically allowing anybody with a driver's license that was still capable of flying to fly as a pilot in command of their own aircraft. Sorry, Neil Landward just said he thought I was saying basic meth. No, it's not basic meth. Basic med. But basically, unless you've had a recent application denied, a medical application, you just have to complete a physical exam with your general practitioner, your local family doctor. You complete this medical course every couple of years, but basically if you have a driver's license, you can go fly an airplane. Now there's limitations on that. You can only have 5 passengers plus yourself. Aircraft is limited to about 6,000 pounds. It has to be within the US. You must fly in not Class A airspace, so 18,000 feet or below. The airplane cannot go faster than 250 knots, and it cannot be a flight for compensation or higher. So one of the things to get basic med is you must have had some medical issued to you at some point in your pilot career. That could have been, years and years ago, but if you had a third class physical, then you are able to fly under the basic med rules if your aircraft falls into that those categories.
Yeah,
so,
for us, it's for your UK, for your PPL, which is what I had. It's a UK Part Medical Class 2. So it's a Class 2 medical certificate for your PPL. And then obviously if you go for your commercial pilot's license, then obviously when you go through to that, you'll then need your Class 1 medical certificate, which can be obtained through an aeromedical examiner, which we have one at Norwich. He's based at Norwich Airport here.
Yeah, so a little bit different, but this definitely does open up the opportunity for pilots that have lost, maybe not lost their medical. Pilots don't have to seek an aviation medical examiner to get back into the cockpit of an airplane. Neil is asking in the chat room, is there pressure to erode the safety culture given the pressure to recover after COVID? I think there are many efforts afoot to sustain the longevity of general aviation here in the US. I don't think it is in danger of going away like it has in a lot of other countries, but I do think that the fuel issue is a problem, right? So we still have low lead fuel. That's the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, and the FAA are pretty hot and heavy on finding some kind of alternative to a leaded fuel. I think there's, it's such a vast economic driver for so many towns and small towns here that I don't think it'll go away. But there's always these efforts to just chip away at some of the aviation freedoms. And you have to balance that with that safety culture. Which, every time we see a Mooney crash into power lines in Gaithersburg, Maryland, the public, the general public sees that and thinks, oh, there's airplanes falling out of the sky, right? Which is certainly not the case.
Right, so we've got loads to squeeze in. We've got tons of stuff to fit in the show. So we're going to move on to the next story, and this one is come to us from John Jester, who sent in a story for us on the show this week, and it's all about could a solar storm bring down an airliner? So take it away, John.
Hello everyone, your special aviation correspondent coming to you from 3 meters below sea level next to the Schiphol Airport. I'm coming to talk to you about the story coming from thedailybeast.com, and it is how a solar storm could bring your plane crashing down. A passenger jet is flying steadily over Alaska when the pilot notices that coordinates on the controls look incorrect. After a few seconds, the radiation counter begins to tick up. Almost simultaneously, a warning from local air traffic control arrives, letting flights know that an intense solar event has started. The pilot realizes that the plane should move a few thousand feet lower and asks the traffic control for permission, only to find communications has been cut out. Dozens of other pilots are experiencing the same issues in their cockpits at the same moment. This hypothetical scenario, as far as has been documented by modern aviation records, nothing of this sort of impending disaster has ever actually happened. But according to reports by aviation regulators, this issue is not whether it will happen, but when. Eruptive events on the sun's surface do not directly affect life on Earth, but they are a known threat for aviation and other technologies. The largest solar radiation storms can result in enhanced radiation at aviation flight levels. Hazel Bain, a research scientist at the Space Weather Prediction Center at the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, told the Daily Beast. This can pose a hazard for flight crew and passengers as well as for avionics. High-frequency radio communication in the polar regions can also be impacted. Awareness of so-called space weather effects has been increasing over the last years, with the regulatory bodies and airlines scrambling to catch up. I'm not going to keep going on with this one, but here we're going to go with the basics of the headline. No, it will not bring us crashing down. The airplanes are shielded from most weather of that type. We could have an intense solar storm that could wipe out power on Earth, but the aircraft is relatively shielded to all this type of stuff. Yes, it will cause problems with radio communications, especially high-frequency communications, but we often don't use that in the polar regions, and most of the time we're using CPDLC, which is either a VHF service to a terrestrial station or is up to a satellite, or can be a mix. We can actually use, on most of our aircraft, all three versions of CPDLC, which means you're ground-based by VHF, ground-based by HF, or satellite-based text messaging to maneuver in the polar regions in most cases. And oftentimes, we don't really need to talk to anybody up there because there is almost nobody there. And yes, if we needed to change altitudes, that'd be a problem. We don't have radiation detectors, so that alarm's not going to go off. Some aircraft that I think Nick has talked about on the APG show, they've carried those radiation monitors, but those are after the fact devices. They record and then provide an exposure level so that they can monitor average exposures for flight crews over the course of a flight. Space weather is a very known area of science, and the NOAA and NASA and many others have collaborated to put satellites up that monitor the sun at all times. DART, a project actually my wife worked on, is a dual satellite that looks at the sun surface and looks for these type of events as they're coming. It can provide that critical warning to give minutes of warning for some of the high energy events. But, most of the particles that cause a lot of problems are slower moving. They're particles. They're not radiation. So this is a big threat to us over our health, but not so much for our daily lives in the aviation. And we monitor that stuff, and we do make changes to our flight paths. If there's an intense solar storm that's coming in, we will actually detour around the polar regions to avoid that area because it is the most chaotic area. We see right now we're going into a high solar cycle. I'm an amateur radio operator, which is means I use HF radios for fun. And this is a great time of year, a great time of the cycle now for that type of operations. It generally enhances radio communications for certain bands, especially the higher bands of the amateur radio service. Same is applicable for aviation radios as well. They have some effect on the lower ones, but they'll have better use of the higher frequencies to travel further. So yeah, this is a big non-event for us. So it sounds scary, but it's not. So once again, your aviation correspondent from 3 meters below sea level at the Schiphol Airport saying goodbye.
I think we're just going to call John our subterranean correspondent.
Yeah.
It's like our mole. Oh, man, that's like a double entendre. He's the mole. He's our subterranean correspondent. So what he was talking about was very important to us in the military. Not talking about military segment quite yet, but the space weather, we have an entire organization in the U.S. Air Force that has slightly splintered off into the U.S. Space Force, which is monitoring space weather and space phenomena. As you can imagine, a lot of our unmanned aerial vehicles, as well as our high precision munitions, as well as our satellite communications to all of those things, and between the Department of Defense, all relies significantly and heavily on space weather and space phenomena. So this was a regular space weather was an actual regular brief in our combat operations even 10 years ago when I was in the Middle East, where we would have in the morning and the evening briefings, somebody would get up there and talk exactly about this, because it is so critical. These kinds of solar flares and what John was talking about, lots of effects on radio frequency spectrum, which we own. The military forces own quite a big chunk of the radio frequency spectrum, and all of it is affected by these kinds of phenomena. So it is a cool story. I did see that story too when it came across my feed. So I want to thank John a lot for sending that feedback in. If anybody's always interested in sending feedback, please do so. We'll air it out. But especially John, I've known him for 35 years now, and I love seeing his face and that new beard he's got. So thank you, John, for sending that in. Now, the next story, I think, is going over to Nev, and it's talking about Denver International Airport, isn't it?
It is, and Denver International is going to build a centre of equity and excellence in aviation. Well, the training centre aims to create a pipeline of aviation talent in Denver by providing career opportunities for underrepresented and young people. The International Airport revealed the mock-ups of its forthcoming Centre of Equity and Excellence in Aviation, which is CEEA, a training centre to create an aviation talent pipeline in Denver. Construction is going to be at the end of next year, and the airport in Denver is the biggest economic engine for Colorado, which means that the new facility will serve an essential role in creating business and career opportunities for the community, Mayor Michael Hancock said. CEEA is a groundbreaking concept that will be instrumental in developing a skilled workforce of the future that will allow our airport to operate effectively and efficiently during its continued growth, he said. The 66,000 square foot facility will be built on level 4 of the hotel and transit centre, making it easy to access Denver's commuter rail station. The space will also feature a hall of equity that is big enough to hold 300 people for training and educational sessions. There will be an adjacent room of similar capacity, and the airport said in a statement that additionally CEEA will have a pre-function and lobby space with a small cafe for networking and small group meetings. The airport has begun implementing some of the centre's future programs, including a business development training academy to provide small business training for potential airport concession businesses. The airport said that nearly 30 business owners have completed and graduated from the program as part of the inaugural session this autumn. The centre will also use a progressive training model to attract, recruit and retain students, and will feature a research and innovation lab to spur research and development through partnerships between the airport and the local universities. That's a great initiative that comes to us from flyingmag.com. Sounds great, doesn't it?
I take it it's no good for us older generation.
No. Especially me.
Okay.
There's a lot of career changers in aviation. We've talked about that too. Tell me if you guys didn't get the opportunity to take your skills and move them over into an aviation capacity. Like Carlos, if you were in the logistics supply chain for Denver International Airport, you wouldn't take that opportunity?
Because if someone offered me a chance to work in an airport emptying bins on outside, I'd go and do it.
Yeah. Listen, and I've walked through Denver International Airport. I was just there with Megan a couple of weeks ago. It's completely under construction, and when I saw all the wiring that is going on, I could only think of Nev. When there are thousands of miles of wires running through and exposed in the main terminal there, I would hire, if I was king of Denver International Airport, which is, by the way, the largest airport in the world behind King Fahd Airport, right? So it's like 33,000 acres. If I was king of Denver International City, I would totally hire Neville Bounds to be our.
I think the unions might have something to say about that.
I'm just reading a comment from Captain Cruz in the chat room. Can you see that one, Armando?
Oh, yeah. No way.
Hey, I've got a Top Gun jumper on. What more could you want in life, honestly? Nev, the king of cabling. Nev is the king of cabling. Honestly, if Nev had a look under here, with the studio here in the PTUK Master Suite, he'd have a mild fit.
Yeah.
A consultancy.
Anyway, let's move swiftly on to the next story. Armando, you've got the last one here in the commercial segment for today.
Okay. Carlos, I don't know if you're able to show the best way I think to do this would just be maybe share your screen and
I will do that. Yeah, just give me a chance to while you're doing that.
So I've actually seen this airplane in person. This is in Roswell, New Mexico. This actually came to us from the auction website, which is mecum.com. This is Elvis's private jet. For decades, this Lockheed Jetstar has been or was the jet of choice for countless A-listers, dignitaries, star-studded celebrities. This particular 1962 Lockheed Jetstar, which Carlos is going to put a picture of here,
bear with me.
Was no exception. If anybody can, no, I'm not even going to do this to the chat room. It was actually owned by Elvis Presley. So this was acquired from Omni Aircraft in December 22nd, 1976, for $840,000 US, which is a lot back then. Lockheed introduced this model in 1957, and this particular airplane is sitting on the ramp at a refurbishment facility in Roswell, New Mexico. It is up for auction. Elvis took ownership of this Jetstar. It was registered as November 20 Tango Fox. He was obviously no stranger to luxury aviation. If you go to Graceland in Memphis, you can see his custom-made Convair 880, which he named Lisa Marie. That one went by the call sign Hound Dog 1, and then this Jetstar, or second Jetstar, was actually identified by its call sign of Hound Dog 2. But either way, you can imagine that the artist, Elvis, used this airplane initially to get all over the country. His band, Colonel Tom Parker, they went all over the country in this jet. The interior, the exterior doesn't look like much because it's been sitting out in the New Mexico desert. But there you can see in the pictures there, the interior, by all accounts, is actually in pretty good shape with that crushed red velvet. Oh man, and some luscious mahogany. But apparently it's still in pretty good shape. So pretty good. I think it was sold to a Saudi Arabian company. Then it ended up back in Roswell in New Mexico. It's been there for decades. But I remember seeing this airplane in 2012 when I first flew into Roswell, and they took me out in a little golf cart. I don't have any pictures, but they took me out in a little golf cart and let me walk around this airplane. So I think the auction is the first week of January 4th. If you just Google, Elvis jet auction, it'll come right up, and you never know. Maybe this will end up at Flixton.
I'd love to see that over at Flix. I mean, we've got some great aircraft over there, but I doubt very highly whether that would end up in the on the grass out there.
Yeah.
But no, brilliant. We'll see what we've got left in the P2K Patreon funds for the end of the month. We'll see if we can get that for Nev.
Be nice.
Yeah. So what have we got coming up next then, Nev? Over to you for this part of the show.
Well, next it's part 3. Oh, I don't know if you can see that. There we go. Of the Nat Boys book, written by Rick Peacock Edwards and Tom Eales. Our good friend Nick Anderson and I went down to White Waltham Aerodrome just outside Maidenhead in Berkshire, and we've been interviewing Rick over the last couple of weeks. This is the third and final part of that interview that Nick did. We'll be asking a question at the end of it for the quiz, because Rick has very kindly signed this book, and we'll be giving it away to the winner. So the quiz will be at the end of part 3, which is coming up now.
Now, I was completely enthralled by Roy Gamblin's description of
Okay.
Right, so that didn't quite work.
We've got a slight technical
We've got a
problem.
slight technical problem with that video there.
Yeah. Okay.
Let's try loading that up again, see if that'll work.
Try it one more time, and if it doesn't work, we'll press on, and then we'll come back to it at the end, perhaps.
Oh, that works. Yeah, it must be that video, because if I click this, yeah, that works. So it must be. Yeah, it's definitely that video.
Well, I'll tell you what, if you guys want to play that out next week, we can move on to commercial 11, which we had originally talked about cutting. Are you guys up for that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I definitely can't get that to play, unfortunately. So we'll have to air that next week, won't we?
Yeah, let's do it. So commercial story 11, which we debated about whether to do or not. This is an interesting one. I was watching this episode back. This is a couple episodes ago when Matt, A320 Matt, was on. And he had an excellent analysis, right? I mean, when we were doing the story about the Viva Colombia A320 that landed with like 248 kilograms of gas on board, a lot of us were sitting there kind of scratching our heads thinking, how on earth could you end up in this situation? Well, fortunately, everyone survived. There was no incident other than a pretty close call. And the aviation authorities in Colombia were actually able to interview the pilots and the crew, go through their decision-making process. Now, we're going to split this up. It's a little lengthy. And the reason I kind of decided to do a verbatim review of the situation is because I didn't want to miss anything myself. So we're each going to take a turn at kind of reading some of the things that have come out from the Colombian Aviation Authority initial report. But the investigators have detailed what was essentially a rapidly changing weather situation at the primary airport and the diversion airports that preceded the low fuel emergency involving this A320neo. So the aircraft actually departed Cali, Colombia on 17 October, bound for Riohacha. The service was expected to take 1 hour, 46 minutes. They had 6,800 kilograms of fuel on board. The fuel load was in line with the requirements established by international standards, as well as the carrier's operational manual. Now, Colombia's Dirección Técnica de Investigación de Accidentes states that Rio Negro Airport, which sits on the Caribbean coast, it serves Barranquilla, Cartagena, Santa Maria, as well. They were all selected as alternates to Rio Negro by the pilots. weather reports did not show any significant meteorological conditions at the destination or the alternates, and forecasts indicated a probable deterioration on the Caribbean coast, which could require some monitoring. However, weather conditions en route were, quote, optimal, according to the investigators. And during the descent preparations, the crew found that the conditions at Rio Hacha and Rio Negro were good, but at the three coastal airports, unfavorable forecasts of storms, rains, and low clouds had developed. So the forecast, as far as the investigators said, did not include the destination, Rio Hacha, because aeronautical services in Colombia don't actually issue them for this airport. It's such a small airport that there's no weather reporting. Now, we have very strict weather reporting criteria here in the U.S. to conduct carrier operations. Carlos, if you want to pick up there.
Yeah, so only after the A320neo had commenced its descent and was passing through 19,000 feet did the crew receive notification that Rio Hacha was closed due to a storm. The crew requested to hold at 18,000 feet and calculated that they would hold for 22 minutes while deciding whether to proceed to Rio Negro instead. According to the captain's testimony, the crew evaluated a combination of documentation, weather radar images, and visual observations from the cockpit, concluding that weather at Branquilla and Cartagena was... if I spelt that, pronounced that wrong, was deteriorating. The inquiry says the pilots also ruled out Santa Marta as not only because it was close to other coastal airports and potentially faced similar weather, but also because it presented risks from having a narrow 1,700 metre runway with certain landing restrictions. Investigators found the decision-making process was affected by intermittent communications over the ACAR system between the crew and the airline operations centre, and because messages were being held up and not delivered in a timely manner. With fuel quantities at 3,200 kilograms, close to minimum diversion level of 3,077 kilograms, and uncertainty as to whether the Rio Hacha would become available soon enough, the crew ultimately opted to divert to Rio Negro via Valledupar. Blimey, these words, I can tell where you picked this story, Armando. Around 47 minutes after commencing diversion, the aircraft ascending through 25,000 feet was cleared to 16,000 feet and to proceed to a waypoint in the vicinity of Rio Negro Airport. But heavy rain was already present and the runway was wet and traffic was building up and the aircraft landing at Rio Negro were experiencing problems. One Airbus A320 crew reported an overrun while landing on runway 19. Although the controller was under increased workload with congested radio frequencies, the inquiry says the aircraft were being placed in holding stacks in a safe, organised and expeditious manner. But the absence of an estimated arrival time for the diverted A320neo, which was holding at 15,000 feet and waiting in the vicinity of runway 01 approach, meant the crew, which had advised the controller that they were quite restricted on fuel, had to assess options under pressure. Analysis of the weather conditions at other airports led the crew to consider diverting to Maticana or Monteria Airport, although the aircraft's flight computers showed that in either case they would arrive with just 100 kilograms of fuel. The inquiry says a flight attempting to depart Rio Negro was forced to shut down its engines and hold as a result of heavy hail, and aircraft waiting to land were still unable to obtain estimates for commencing approaches. When the aircraft control told all aircraft at the airport was closed and prompting inbound flights to start requesting alternates. And Nev, you've got the next part.
Yeah, well, about 20 minutes after reaching Rio Negro, the crew declared a fuel emergency and requested to proceed to Monteria, setting the transponder to the emergency squawk code of 7700. According to the inquiry published on the 17th of November, the crew maintained a calm, professional and assertive attitude in their communications with air traffic control, despite the circumstances. The captain's testimony states that the flight management system indicated that the twin jet would arrive with 400 kilos of fuel. After touchdown on runway 14 at Montera, having flown for 3 hours and 40 minutes, the aircraft was found to have landed with just 282 kilos of fuel. None of the 178 passengers and 6 crew members were injured, and in a preliminary recommendation, the inquiry says that the Air Navigation Directorate should look at the technical requirements necessary to allow real-time weather visualization on air traffic control radar screens in order to provide up-to-date information to pilots.
Yeah.
Is not stating the obvious?
Yeah. Well, and it's easy to forget now in 2022 that there are still airports that do not have advanced weather reporting capabilities, that do not have satellite radar capabilities. And there are certainly big chunks of South America, big chunks of Africa, big chunks of Asia that do not have the weather reporting resources that we are used to in Europe and in the United States or in North America. Just for a little size comparison here. So the distances we're talking about, the Colombia itself is not a small country. If you were to overlay Colombia, the country, over Europe, the northern tip where this was all happening, the Barranquilla, Cartagena, Caribbean coast would essentially be Denmark, Finland, Copenhagen, like that whole area, which was their destination. The eastern part of the country would essentially be Paris. The western part would be Western Poland, right on the Russian border. And the southern tip of Colombia would lie somewhere around Albania, right? So you're essentially talking the entire core of all of continental Europe. Now, so now you see that's a pretty big chunk of real estate. And as they were departing, this is essentially what the report is saying, that all of the Netherlands and Denmark don't have weather reporting capabilities. And that was their essential destination. Imagine hearing that and going, wait a minute, where are we going to go? Because there was unforecasted, unforeseen storms, hail, low visibility. Now we have runway restrictions, size restrictions. And unlike Europe, there's no alternative. So it's either go to Copenhagen or turn around and go all the way back to probably the nearest alternate is Berlin. These are the distances that we're talking about. Or go all the way back to what is essentially Paris, all the way from Copenhagen. So the distances are not small by any means. And the crew is trying to put all these scenarios and contingency plans into the FMS without the use, like we have iPads, we have Nextrad, we have ADS-BN weather. They don't have that down there. I'm able to plot an alternate and then about 4 other alternates. It takes me about a minute to do that if I take my time. They just don't have resources. And so this is just a little bit more insight in that I think we all initially said, what crew decision happened that they ended up in this situation? And as we get more and more information, kind of is turning out that the crew was actually pretty diligent in their actions, and really the system failed them, and they were left to make lemonade with lemons and do the best that they could, which thankfully they did, and they recovered the aircraft to an airfield with no incident. So I think a little bit of a swing of the pendulum over in favor of the crew after the initial investigation.
It's very interesting, I must say. Thank you for that explanation. But don't you think they should have let the passengers in the back know what was going on? Perhaps a PA just to say, by the way, ladies and gentlemen, we've got a thimble full of fuel left. Not to worry
Would you?
anyone.
Would you want to know that?
Probably not. No. I mean, well, it wouldn't bother me too much, I suppose. But I would hate to think if there was a cabin full of Matt Smiths sitting in the back there, that might not have been too good.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure what I would. I kind of subscribe to the Delta Airlines methodology of when you have an emergency, it's 2 in, 2 out. So you got to let your cabin crew know. You got to let your other pilot know what it is that you're intending on doing, and then 2 out, you got to let ATC know and the company know what it is that you're intending on doing. And when you don't have an answer or a plan, what are you going to let them know? I think if you told them, start sending your "I love you" texts, it's gonna result with that scene in Airplane the movie. Where,
don't worry, guys. The A-team are on board.
Pandemonium.
Hannibal
And next thing
will have a plan.
I know. So I don't know, but anyway, so that kind of wraps up the commercial.
Yes, we've got a special little segment to play out for you all now. And cast your minds back to many moons ago, back to when there was a fabled podcast that used to broadcast a weekly show all the way from Australia. Cast your minds back, that's a long while ago, when a certain podcast by the name of the Plain Crazy Down Under podcast with Grant and Steve used to produce their fantastic content. Where have you gone, Grant and Steve, honestly? Well, Grant got in contact with me early this week, and he's been doing what he does best over there and commentating at one of the air shows. And he was at the Scone, was it the Wings Over Scone? Is that air show in Australia? And he's put a little video for us together for us to watch on the show. A little 5-minute clip of what went on there. So I'm going to play that for you right now.
Guys, Curtis P40E restored here. Formerly, well, it's in the paint, it's in the markings of an aircraft flown by Bobby Gibbs. Thus the paint on the cowl. I'll zoom in on that as I walk forward. So, Bobby Gibbs, famous Australian World War II ace, flew this markings scheme in the Middle East. Okay guys, question for you. When is a P-51 not a P-51? When it's a CA-18 license built in Australia. Mustang. Commonwealth Aircraft Corporation once again built this particular Mustang, the CA-18, based on the P-51D model. Beautiful aircraft. Carlos, I don't want to give you truck envy, but Kenworth cab over, hauling what we call in Australia a B double. The little trailer at the front is the A, the big trailer at the back is the B. Known here as a B double, very common way of, not so much the paint job, but that style and arrangement. Very common way of getting freight around Australia. And if you've heard of a road train, they're bigger than this. Road train will probably have another 1 or 2 more B-size trailers on the back. Oh, look! A taste of British. The Hawker Hunter. Lovingly restored. Absolutely beautiful work on the ejection seat. Was just chatting to the guy who worked on that. And a MiG-17. Watch out for these ones. They're going to be doing a new paint job on that one soon, as you can probably tell it needs it. Here's the Mackie trainer, used by the Royal Australian Air Force, Royal Australian Navy for training pilots. And then the Mirage. You went from the Mackie to the Mirage. Mach 2 fighter. And of course a whole lot of people staying out of the sun. A couple of concessions. And here we go guys, the cars. And that middle silver one is indeed a James Bond DB5 Aston. Spitfire being towed, the Mark 9. Rampy's taking it over to get it fueled before the next display segment. Now, sorry I can't bring you the sounds of the engines running and all that, because normally when they're running, I'm busy working as a commentator. But here you go, Bristol Fighter, F2B, in the colours of an Australian Flying Corps aircraft. It's an absolute cracker aircraft. Of course, a Yak 52, the yellow thing in the background, and the blue item here, that's an Edgeco 540, Edge 540, sorry, Zivco Edge 540. Get it right, Grant, a Zivco Edge 540. Does an incredible aerobatics display, the blue thing. But what do we got here? Oh, look, a beautiful silver Harvard. The American T6A. And in the background there, the Australian Windshield. So we all know about the Harvard, so we'll just come over here. Yep, whoop, American. But let's look at this Commonwealth Aircraft Corporation aircraft. This is the Windshield. A trainer, 50s to 70s type of thing. 1950s. Oh, what do we got here? Oh, this way up. So walking towards the Avenger, but just behind it here, we've got the Wolf Pitts Pro. Paul Bennett flies this. Does a solo display that is absolutely out of this world. Now this aircraft, also designed and built here in Australia. This is the Wirraway. In the local tongue, Wirraway means challenge. And this was the trainer that replaced the Tiger Moth. And designed to challenge the pilot. If you could fly this, then you could fly the Spitfire. And if you notice, I'm going to pan around a little. So this aircraft looks a whole lot like that one, doesn't it? There's the T6 Harvard. There's the CAC Wirraway. Guess what? They've got a common ancestor. Both these aircraft were descended from the North American NA-16. The Aussies went to the UK, couldn't find any aircraft they liked, and to the shock and horror of the people of the time and power, they went to America and came back with an American design. And oh, that was just not on, according to some politicians. But, you know, politicians, they haven't changed, mate. Yeah, everyone's gone in to watch a movie and to avoid the heat. Mad Dogs, Englishmen and me are out here in the sun. So I'm going to turn it off here and get some more further in.
Discover the pioneers of
Bobby Gibbs.
And we're back. We have a slight technical issue in the studio right now. In that for some reason the video's not playing out at all. So it's not. It wasn't the interview that you'd edited and put together, Nev. Anyway.
Oh, good. I'm pleased about that.
Yes. But thanks to Grant for the video, for playing out. Great to hear from Grant. What do you think of that, Armando? Obviously, you love your air shows as well.
I love the video. First of all, I love the P40. I think the P40 is like one of the coolest airplanes in the world. And I actually I had to look up the CA-18, the P-51 Australian-made one. And all I want to know is it cheaper than buying a P-51? Because I would get one.
We'll have to ask Grant. We'll have to ask Grant that. Definitely. Right, so Armando, hopefully the military intro will play. So would you like to kick things off, Armando?
Yes. You can hear me okay right now, right?
Yes, we can hear you.
We've had to just, as we say, automate down and just go to basic iPhone microphone. So we've got a couple military stories here. One of them is an update on a story that we've kind of been following. We get a little bit emotional about. But anyway, Carlos, if it'll play, let's hit the military button.
What's up, Bogies 135?
And that'll be a no. So let's just say that vMix will not play any video that is inserted into it. So, right. So let's just pretend that the intro music played, and Armando, start things.
So we're going to call it Your Communications.
Up to the bus stop.
And that's my Alexa reminding me to get out to the bus stop. I love this. This is tip-top entertainment right now. So this first military story that we have is from yahoo.com. And it's really just an update on that Marine pilot that was arrested in Australia. It has now been determined that that individual has been deemed by the Australian authorities as an extreme high-risk individual as he waits possible extradition to the United States on what is actually undisclosed charges. You can still hear me okay, right?
Yeah, roger that.
Okay. I think the stream may be down.
There we go.
It's just kind of stuck. Okay. So Australian federal police arrested Daniel Duggan, 54 years old, in October. We talked about this a couple of weeks ago. The arrest came as the Australians were investigating whether any of its former troops had actually been recruited to train Chinese military pilots. The charges that Duggan is facing are not public. They haven't been made public. According to Dennis Morales, who's a lawyer for Mr. Duggan, they told that reporters on Monday that the Australian prison had actually denied his client medical treatment and pens and stationery, according to Reuters. He lived in Australia from 2005 to 2014, managing a business called Top Gun Tasmania, in which former US and UK military pilots gave tourist rides in fighter jets. We would all, I'm sure, love to partake in that. Now, that's all according to Reuters. Then he moved to China to work as an aviation consultant, according to the Associated Press. Now, the Marine veteran actually had a Beijing address with Chinese businessman Su Bin, who was sentenced to prison in a U.S. prison in 2016 for helping Chinese hackers steal information in U.S. military secrets related, of course, to aviation technology. Reuters also found that Duggan and Su also worked for more than a decade for a South African flight school that is now under scrutiny from British authorities for training Chinese military pilots. So through his lawyer, Duggan has denied any crime. Morales asked Australia's Attorney General to release Duggan, who is an Australian citizen that renounced his U.S. citizenship. Kind of in light of this whole thing happening, multiple nations are investigating China's efforts to recruit Western pilots. We talked about on the show about British pilots being targeted by China to recruit them to train People's Liberation Army Air Force pilots. More countries are now investigating these reports about their pilots being approached with highly, they're calling remunerative contracts for the same reason. Basically, the British pilots were being lured by about, $270,000 US a year, about 250,000 UK pounds, being recruited since the end of 2019. And it actually, the French newspaper Le Figaro reported that China had also actively been seeking French instructors for aircraft carrier landings. So this is like a spy movie unraveling. It just the plot thickens, and there's more and more countries, more and more pilots that are saying, oh yeah, I was also approached. So we'll see what happens with this one.
Who's that sent in by, or was that one of the ones you found online, Armando?
Yeah, no, this was just a bit of an update found through, this one came from yahoo.com, but I think the War Drive, the Aviationist had a story on this too. So I've just kind of been tracking this one because, as a former military person, it's close to home that anybody would go out and voluntarily go out and train the opposition.
So the next story comes to us from EurasianTimes.com, and it's Argentina puts India's LCA TJAS back burner starts evaluating the US Origin F-16 Fighting Falcons in Denmark. So a top delegation of the Argentine Air Force is reportedly in Denmark to evaluate the second-hand F-16 fighter jets. The South American nation appears to have postponed the technical evaluation of India's Tejas Light Combat Aircraft, or LCA. Along with the Danish alternative, Argentina is also considering the Chinese-built JF-17 Thunderbolt, or Thunder, and India's Hustan Aeronautic Limited, or HAL, Tejas aircraft. The service has been attempting to examine the different aspects of fighter jets before making the final decision. The delegation is conducting technical assessments of the Danish F-16 A and B MLU fighter bomber jets for the procurement process. Director of Plans, Programs and Budget for the Argentine Air Force, Brigadier Diego Garcia, stated the delegation consisted of experts and technicians that went to the European nation to assess the offered aircraft. He also stated the technical teams and experts are currently researching and reviewing bids from China, India and Denmark. The F-16 A and B MLU aircraft is proposed to Argentina under the joint efforts of Copenhagen and Washington. Previously, there were speculations that the Argentines had finalised the Chinese JF-17 for its air force during the pandemic, and Argentina's ambassador to China met the officials of the China National Aerotechnology Import and Export Corporation for the procurement of Chinese fighter jets. Some reports claim that China had sent a few JF-17 jets to Argentina for evaluation by their Air Force, and the assessments of the Chinese aircraft had lasted around a month. In response to the preemptive news, the United States reportedly pressured Argentina to abandon the deal. Now, is it me, or is the F-16 never, ever going to go anywhere? It's almost like the F-16 is going to be like one of these fighter jets that will be around for about 1,000 years, as long as the B-52.
Yeah, it probably will be one of those contenders for aircraft that serve 100 years in military service. Yeah, this was an interesting story. We've talked about I don't know how it's pronounced in India. I can only assume that it's pronounced the Tejas, which is Texas, right? But yeah, this was a bit of a snub because I think the Argentinians had been looking at that Indian produced Tejas pretty heavily over the last couple of years, and now something must have happened in the government and through the economic channels that this is now swayed to a U.S. deal for the F-16. Interesting indeed.
Especially when you see the videos on YouTube and out of all these F-16s lined up at the boneyards, because I've seen them on there. There's still obviously there are probably the older versions of the F-16s, but there's still plenty of airframes sitting out there in the desert.
And you think about the geography of Argentina, even an older F-16 is a pretty capable aircraft. I mean, they're probably their biggest rival is just to the north in Brazil. Brazil has a pretty significant military, but Chile to the left side, they're about pretty much up here, and you can't deny that even an A model F-16, the second hand, is a pretty capable fighter aircraft.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind having one. I'm sure Jonathan Warner would love one in his back garden as well. Anyway, Nev, you've got the next story, and I think this is one, Nev, that I think you'll agree that if you're a US military commander or something, this is not a story you'd like to hear.
No, it's on the PakistanToday.com website, and it says that the Taliban interim administration repaired 70 damaged military planes and helicopters that were damaged by US soldiers before they left Afghanistan after 20 years in August last year. The Afghan force has repaired 70 damaged military planes and helicopters given to the previous government of President Ghani by the US and its allied forces, the Afghan Defense Military spokesman told Anadolu Agency in Kabul. He added that all of them are now in service and being used by the Afghan Air Force. US soldiers had damaged military aircraft, helicopters, and a wide range of other military vehicles before leaving the country on August the 31st, 2021. We didn't have a single operational aircraft when we came to power, he said. The Taliban interim administration then began to rebuild the Afghan Air Force, he said, saying that over 70 destroyed planes and helicopters have been repaired and put into service so far with our own means and the support of our technicians. On the Taliban's request, approximately 40 pilots and technicians returned to Afghanistan and began their work, he said, thanking them for repairing the damaged planes and reintroducing them to the Air Force.
Of course they would thank them, right? Yeah, I don't know what they did to lure these 70 technicians back. I'm a little bit suspicious of the actual number of getting 70 aircraft back in the air so shortly after.
Yes.
But I don't want to doubt it. If I, like Carlos said, right, if you're a commander, you don't want to hear this. As a military commander, I would actually kind of think, okay, well, when we dismantled them on the way out, probably knew what they were doing, and where are they getting the parts to
repair? Yeah,
you know, like for example, so to decommission a rifle, one of the things you can do is
firing pin.
Yeah, just get rid of the firing pin. Where do you get? Anybody have a spare stock of like that specific model firing pins? Right? Probably not. I don't know. Maybe they do. But I would be very, very suspicious that all 70 of these aircraft are actually fully mission capable. Even luring somehow, probably with money and security, some of these technicians back. Yeah, I would be suspicious. Plus, I mean, also they're not combat aircraft. Like we're talking about caravans, we're talking about some helicopters. This is kind of like basic infrastructure needs. So if they get them back in the air, will they use them for combat purposes? Yeah, you know, it's certainly a risk that they'll use them for nefarious purposes against their own people. But also to run a government in a country, you need some kind of airlift operation. And perhaps this is what they're focusing on. I don't know. Just an interesting story, I think.
Perhaps they should have just run a couple of C-17s in and just stuck them all on there before they left and take them back rather than leave them.
Yeah, and you know, somebody had to make that decision. Somebody made that decision of, do we destroy the aircraft, or do we disable them, or do we try to fly them out? You know, I don't know. Whoever chose that course of action chose it for a reason. Speaking of secondhand aircraft, a very quick update from Ukraine. There's just a recent story from thedrive.com that the United Kingdom is actually sending 3 WS-61 Sea King helicopters plus 10,000 artillery shells over to Ukraine in the UK's latest aid package to Kyiv. These Sea King helicopters will be able to provide a search and rescue capability, according to the UK MOD. Now, the Ukrainian officials, as we've seen in the news, have been clamoring and asking for and begging for aviation assets. The U.S., for instance, and a surprise move, actually provide 20 Mi-17. So that's interesting that the U.S. provided 20 Russian-made helicopters to Ukraine. But there have been some trepidations and some hesitations on behalf of the Pentagon to offer up, you know, aircraft like the F-16, right? That's very expensive aircraft, takes a lot of training to go to. But I think for search and rescue purposes and for local area transport, the UK providing these Sea Kings to Ukraine is incredibly important. And again, just continues, you know, we got to keep it in the news. Like, we're not a political podcast, we're not a news podcast, but it's important to remember that there is a conflict going on over there, and people are in need.
Now, Armando, before we wrap up the military this week, Jonathan Warner sent us in a very interesting story, didn't he, this week? I've got the video here, but just before I click play, just let the listeners give us a brief on what this was.
Oh, the good old F-35. We just keep dinging them up. I don't know how many more ways other than just a ball hammer to the side we can come up with damaging F-35s. but you're gonna check out this video. It happened in Okinawa. Yeah, captured by a security footage camera, and I don't even know what's going on with this airplane. It seems like somebody's in the cockpit riding the brakes. Maybe it has some kind of problem, but man, the whatever it is that happens, it looks like the main landing gear brakes just locked, and the tow bar kept moving with a tug, and it just scooped the nose gear right out from under the aircraft, just plopped embarrassingly onto its nose. Probably not cheap. Probably a little bit of an expensive fix.
Just find it. When you watch that video, though, the aircraft is, you can see it like juddering up. You know, it's as if someone's left the handbrake on. You know, it's
you almost require Benny Hill music in the background.
What do you think of that one, Nev?
Classic. Absolutely brilliant.
Oh, no.
Yes, I was wondering what I was going to see until I watched the video. But yeah, brilliant. Very good.
Oh, honestly. Right, so it's time of the weekend for our captionist, isn't it, Nev? So this week I chose a picture for the caption list that was it's just fantastic. It's a picture that was it's been in our group chat, actually, the host group chat, for quite some time now. And I spoke to Nev earlier on the week. I said, Nev, shall we use this one as our caption this competition picture for this week? He said, yes, use it. So Nev, for the benefit of the viewers and our listeners, could you explain, while I pop the picture up, what this week's caption this picture was?
That's an E190 SR aircraft at London City Airport that took me to Amsterdam a few weeks, and somebody's been doing some sign writing on the outside by the looks of it. It says www.seat1a.com, and then it says NA with a arrow going through it, Nev Airways. Looks quite realistic, actually.
It does look quite good, actually. I will say it sparked some quite big interest in the on the Facebook page, I will say. So, Nev, kick things off.
Well, Dirk says, well, that would make Nev A the only airline in the world operating single-seat aircraft exclusively.
Daniel says, where the engine note is just perfect.
Mark H said, Nev liked it so much, he just bought the company.
I don't doubt that. Jan is saying, while the original service quality is in open descent, the most loyal customer is starting a revival of the legend that used to be the world's favourite airline.
And Chris says, all I can say is about time. It's about time, is what he says.
Gordon said, Nev's just started his own airline, branching out now.
And some young strapper of a lad, Armando, says the passengers were confused while boarding as every seat was labelled 1A.
Bill says, clearly this makes Nev an honorary Canadian. He's in seat 1A, and as indicated on the nose wheel door, Canadian dollars are accepted, CAD, which is part of the registration of the aircraft, Charlie Alpha Delta.
John says, Nev Airlines, where everyone gets to sit on a throne.
James says, or is that NA as in naturally aspirated? Neville Airlines. Is Nev naturally aspirated, or is the plane naturally aspirated? I'm confused.
He then goes on to say, NA Nev Airlines, short for Naturally Aspirated Never Airlines. Thank you for flying with us, and good luck. Some great stuff in there, folks. Thanks ever so much indeed for your contributions.
Yes, I'm just looking at the chat room because normally they find some good points in there. Oh, it says, Captain Cruz is saying in the chat room, actually, Nev, he says, but why does the arrow point to seat 3A?
It's a great question. I have to have a word with the graphic design department, won't I?
Oh, it's excellent. Just making sure there's no other. Neil Lamwell says, about time, sir, said Jeeves. Another gin and Dubonnet?
Yeah.
God, I remember those Dubonnet, the little globe drinks. I remember those. So don't forget, if you want to contribute to the caption this, we run this every week well, hopefully every week we do on the show. On a Wednesday, we pop the picture up on our Facebook page. Don't forget, if you don't follow us already, check us out on Facebook. The picture will pop up on there during the week, and you can leave your comments on, and we'll read the best ones out on the show. And Armando's frantically waving. Are you waving at an aircraft, Armando?
No, Maddie just got home from school, and she's like, where is he?
Yeah, Daddy's outside. Don't panic. So
to the back garden.
To the back garden. Yes, you are in the back garden. So we're going to be getting together very soon, aren't we, guys? We're going to be recording our Christmas show very soon, and we've got a competition we're going to be running on the Christmas show, haven't we, Nev? With some really great prizes we've got, which arrived today. So we're going to be doing that competition on our Christmas show. We're going to be putting... it's going to be a quick Christmas show this year, aren't we, Nev? We're going to try and get everything done and dusted within our usual 2-hour slot, aren't we?
Yeah, it'd be nice to do that. And really looking forward to showing you some of the things that we've been up to during the year again, bits and pieces. And we've got some great prizes as well. So stay tuned for those.
So, Nev...
to be fair...
Oh, go on.
Fair, we did record it in 2 hours last year, but it just took 80 to edit it.
Yeah, we're streamlining the Christmas show a lot more this year to make things a bit easier for Matt, Nev, and John to tie everything together as they do so well every year. But anyway, we're going to start to bring the show to a close. Nev, social media links, just for in case anyone don't know.
Yes, if you're on Facebook, Twitter or Instagram, just search those social media platforms for Plain Talking UK. You can send us a WhatsApp to the studio, which is +44 757 224 9166. That's +44 757 224 9166. You can email the show, which is podcast@plaintalkinguk.com, and the website is all the W's, plaintalkinguk.com. Don't forget you can subscribe to our YouTube channel as well, and you'll get notifications when we go live, and you can help by shaping the conversation of the show by joining us in the chat room, as so many people do. Go to youtube.com and just search I'll get my words out, for Plain Talking UK. If you go to our website, you'll also find there's an Amazon link there. So if you do your shopping with Amazon, they pay us a small referral fee. If you'd like to do that through the website, please do, and have a look for that link. Also, you can become a Patreon of the show as well and make some contributions, which are always well received. Have a look at the website for that information.
So we're going to wrap up the show, but we're going to say a big thanks to everyone who's joined us tonight for the show. Big thanks to all our audio downloaders as well of the show. Not forgetting you guys who download the show every week via the usual downloading podcast type apps and online. Don't forget, if you're there, if you've got a spare 5 minutes, give us a little review on iTunes or Podbean or Stitcher. We really would appreciate that as well if you could leave us a review. Now, we've got a few minutes before we finish. Little round robin as to what we're all up to, because they're all itching to know, Nev, whether you're going to be flying the glorious airline again next week.
I am. On Sunday, in fact. So I'm actually going out to Stockholm on Sunday. And then I am doing some driving around Sweden. Then I'm getting the train from Sweden to Denmark, which I've not done before. So I'll be going across the, not such a new bridge now, over to Copenhagen. And then flying back on Tuesday, or Tuesday afternoon, I think it is. But I noticed that my flight back from Copenhagen to Heathrow, I'm currently in 4 Foxtrot. This is not a number or a letter I even recognise. So I should be doing some research and online argument in the next 24 hours, I'm sure.
Do they not know you own your own airline, Nev?
We'll see how we get on, but I'm not too worried.
Oh, is that? I take it that's all going to be on the old the Grand Airbus, Nev.
Yes, it's A320 both ways. So out to Stockholm Arlanda on Sunday morning, and then back from Copenhagen on a 320 as well. Yeah.
So, Armando, what's going on in the world of you next week? More flying, hopefully.
Believe it or not, it kind of slows down for the holidays. Sorry, there's a leaf blower in the background. I've got a whole lot of nothing this whole week until Thursday, where I'm going to commercial down to Palm Beach. And then Friday, won't be on the show. I'll have a trip from Palm Beach out to Las Vegas. And then airline back home, deadhead back home to Charlotte. So pretty quick trip. Just happens to be on Friday.
So I won't be on next week because I've got my one and only Christmas Works Party disco that I'm doing next Friday, so I shan't be here, and Armando won't be here. I'm gonna have to. I'll get some super subs to join you guys next week.
Well, and of course we'll be playing out the final part of Rick Peacock Edwards as well, won't we? So
yes,
that'll fill 18 minutes quite easily.
That will, and obviously don't forget at the end of that interview that we will play out next week, or that will play out next week, there will be that chance to win that signed book, all to do with that interview series that we have been playing out, the Nat Boys. So that's very good indeed. So that is about all the time we've got left on the show. So it's time to say goodbye. So I'm gonna leave the outro to you guys while I hopefully will play the outro. So over to you, Nev.
Well, yes, I'm very sorry about the technical difficulties this evening. They always happen when Matt's not around, don't they? Have you noticed that? But anyway, so thanks to everyone for joining us today. I hope you have a good rest of the day, Armando, as well, and a good weekend. Good to see you again. And meanwhile, I hope everyone has a great weekend here, and thanks for watching us. See you again soon. Bye for now.
And guess what just happened? And that is literally gets to 2 seconds.
I think there's something faulty.
There is something not quite right with the playout system this evening, I do believe, guys. So just pretend that the credits just played and everything is fine.
Good.
That's a wrap.
All right. Everybody have a great weekend.
Oh, blimey. Anyway, right, yes, everyone have a great weekend. Thank you, everyone. Hilarious. Captain Cruz, hilarious. Neil Lamborn, that's what she said. Richard Adams, you're not allowed to stop the show. Oh, my word. No outro. We'll have to get a violinist to come in and play a live outro music for us here in the studio. Oh, I don't know. Whatever next, guys. Right. Well, we are gonna say goodbye to everyone in the chat room now, and we're gonna cut the stream for this evening so we can all get off and back to what's Armando doing here? Let me bring Armando's camera back on. There we go. For the benefit of everyone in the world of YouTube, who's that, Armando?
This is our friend Chucky, or Charles Darwin.
Doesn't look nothing like Chucky. Chucky has like a romper suit on, and
this dog has nothing to do with aviation, but I love him because he looks like a little old man with his little pink lips and his little pink nose, and he's so wise.
And on that bombshell, Nev, say I'll leave you with the last words, Nev, before I cut the stream.
Yes, well, it's been a mixture of a show tonight. We've tried to put in a lot of stuff, but there's going to be more content next week, obviously, for the videos that we couldn't play out tonight. So in the meantime, as I say, hope everyone has a great weekend, and see you next week. Take care. Bye for now.